The airlock hissed, and the cold scent of recycled oxygen filled Vesper Station. Lyra's forearms trembled as she adjusted the straps of her containment harness. She had been caught trespassing in the human sector of the station, an unthinkable breach for her kind, the Ilari. On her homeworld of Zephyria, the slightest act of disobedience could mean execution. She had expected pain, fear, and the chilling cold of a human interrogation chamber. But instead, she was greeted by something utterly alien: calmness. He stood there, a man with disheveled brown hair and tired gray eyes, looking more like a researcher than a torturer. His hands were bare, not clad in gloves, and he wore a faded lab coat with ink stains on the sleeves. He didn't brandish a weapon. He didn't scowl. He simply offered her a small, worn medical kit. "I'm Dr. Elias Wren," he said quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Let's see that arm." Lyra's instincts screamed at her to fight, to flee, to resist. But her right forelimb throbbed violently. A jagged shard from the station's outer hull had cut through her flesh during her reckless approach, and the pain made it hard to focus. She reluctantly extended the limb. He didn't move quickly. He didn't make sudden gestures. He simply knelt beside her and examined the wound with careful, precise fingers. "This will sting," he warned. Lyra braced herself for some human form of punishment, expecting a scalpel or worse. But all he did was clean the wound with antiseptic and gently wrap it with a sterile bandage. The sting was mild, nothing compared to what she had imagined. You aren't going to hurt me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Elias gave a small, tired smile. "No, that's not my job. You need care, not cruelty." Lyra's mind raced. Her entire life, she had been taught that humans were cruel, barbaric, unpredictable. But this one human, this one man, was defying every expectation she had been fed. She wanted to flee, to escape before someone else arrived, and made her regret this act of vulnerability. But she couldn't move her bandaged arm without wincing. And so she stayed. Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. Elias shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do. You're hurt. That's enough reason for me." Lyra stared at him, trying to read his expression. There was no malice, no hidden threat, just humanity. The concept felt foreign, almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. She had expected layers of deception, political motives, or some cruel game. Instead, he was just helping her. Hours passed, though she wasn't sure how many. Time on Vesper Station moved differently, measured not by day and night, but by the faint flickers of light from the reactor and the soft hum of the life support systems. Elias had moved her to a small quarters room, cleaned and stabilized her wound, and even offered her food, an alien fruit paste he had synthesized from the station's limited hydroponic supply. She had eaten it hesitantly and used to humans strange textures and tastes. Yet, she had survived, and the pain in her arm had dulled. "You're awake," Elias said when she finally stirred. He held a cup of steaming water in his hands. "Drink this. It'll help." Lyra took it cautiously, the warmth of the liquid spreading through her chest in a way she hadn't realized she missed. On Zephyria, nothing was ever this simple. Pain was common. Comfort was a luxury. Trust was dangerous. "I don't understand," she said. "No human has ever treated me like this before." Elias laughed softly. "I suppose you've had bad experiences, but not every human is cruel. Some of us just try to survive without making others suffer more than they have to." Lyra watched him for a long moment. Then, despite the throbbing ache in her arm and the lingering fear in her chest, she asked, "Why do you stay here? Alone? In the human sector? Don't you ever get bored?" He shrugged again. "This station is old, quiet, mostly forgotten by the council. I like it that way. I can think. I can exist without pretending to be someone I'm not." He paused, his gaze flicking toward the observation window. Beyond the glass, the void of space stretched endlessly, dotted with distant stars and drifting debris. "Besides," he added quietly, "I don't like seeing someone suffer if I can do something about it." Lyra blinked. She had been raised to value cunning, strategy, and survival above all else. Compassion was a weakness. Yet here was a human showing it freely, as though it were as natural as breathing. She didn't know how to process it. The following days were strange. Lyra found herself lingering in the quarters room longer than she had to. Elias treated her injuries meticulously, and sometimes they spoke. Not about politics or espionage, but about trivial things: the hum of the station's reactor, the colors of the void outside, even small jokes that made Lyra blink in confusion. Humans had humor, she realized, and warmth, and something else, something that made her chest tighten in ways she couldn't explain. She began to trust him, a dangerous thought for an Ilari operative. And yet, the more she trusted him, the more she realized how alone she had been. Zephyria valued cunning, efficiency, and obedience. It never valued empathy, never valued connection. And yet, here she was, slowly learning that human kindness existed, and it terrified her. One night, while Elias slept at his workstation after a long shift repairing the station's sensors, Lyra wandered to the observation deck. The vast emptiness of space seemed to echo her own loneliness. She could hear the faint hiss of the life support system and the distant creaks of the station's metal bones. "Do humans always live like this?" she asked softly, though no one was there to answer. Drifting, suspended, waiting for something to happen? A voice replied softly behind her. Sometimes. Elias had followed her silently, watching the stars through the same viewport. "We wait, yes, but we also hope, and sometimes we act." Lyra turned to him. He didn't offer a hand or gesture, just looked at her with that quiet patience she had come to rely on. She felt an unfamiliar urge to reach out, to touch the human who had shown her nothing but care, but fear restrained her. "Why don't you fear me?" she asked. "I was trespassing. I could have killed you." Elias shook his head. "You didn't. And even if you could, fear doesn't help anyone. You're hurt, not evil. I choose to see the hurt, not the threat." Lyra's chest tightened. In Zephyria, seeing the hurt before the threat was unthinkable. Here, it was revolutionary. Dangerous, even. The turning point came when the station suffered a sudden meteor strike. The impact rocked the entire outpost, throwing Lyra to the ground and sending sparks cascading from the power conduits. Alarms blared. Fires erupted in the maintenance corridors. Humans scrambled to contain the damage. Elias grabbed her hand. "Stay with me," he shouted over the chaos. "We need to get to the auxiliary shelter." Lyra's instincts screamed at her to flee, to escape alone. But something inside her, something fragile and human, made her cling to his hand. Together, they navigated the damaged corridors, avoiding electrical arcs and falling debris. When they reached the shelter, Elias pulled her inside, sealing the heavy door behind them. They collapsed, panting and bruised. Lyra's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of surviving beside someone who had saved her without hesitation. You saved me again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias gave a small, tired smile. "And I would again." For the first time in her life, Lyra felt gratitude without suspicion. She had always assumed kindness came with strings, that mercy was a tool, not a gift. But here, in the cold metal womb of Vesper Station, she was learning that it could exist for its own sake. In the days that followed, the meteor strike caused the station to enter emergency protocols. Supplies were low, and tensions ran high. Yet, Lyra and Elias continued their quiet bond. They shared meals, repaired the damaged sections of a station, and spoke of things neither had ever admitted aloud. Lyra told him stories of Zephyria, its cold cities, its rigid hierarchy, the endless expectation of perfection. Elias told her about Earth, about people who failed, who succeeded, who loved and lost. One evening, as the station rotated lazily against the backdrop of distant stars, Lyra finally asked, "Do you ever think about leaving? About going somewhere else?" Elias looked at her, thoughtful. "Sometimes. But sometimes I think it's more important to stay. To be here, to help where I can." Lyra nodded slowly. "You? Help even those who might harm you?" He shrugged. "Even those who might harm me. Because it's the right thing to do." Lyra's chest swelled with a mixture of emotions she could not name. Admiration, confusion, something tender and frighteningly human. Weeks passed. The station stabilized. Repairs were complete. And when the time came for Lyra to leave, to report back to her superiors, to return to Zephyria, she hesitated at the airlock. "You don't have to go," Elias said quietly. You can stay, if you want. Lyra's heart ached. In Zephyria, returning meant punishment if she revealed anything of her time here. But leaving meant abandoning the one human who had shown her that kindness could exist without expectation. She looked back at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Perhaps one day, she said. Elias nodded. I'll be here. She stepped through the airlock, the hum of the station fading behind her, and for the first time in her life, she felt something she had never known: hope. Not for power, not for survival, but for connection. And perhaps for the first time, she understood that sometimes mercy was stronger than fear. Lyra drifted into the void, carrying with her the memory of a human who had chosen compassion over cruelty, who had bandaged her wound without hesitation, and in doing so, had healed a part of her she didn't even know was broken. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, but for the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt capable. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of Vesper Station, Elias Wren sat at his workstation, unaware that he had changed an entire life with nothing more than a bandage and a steady hand.